Literally in the last 2 years, we went through 3 inflection points in AI. The first inflection point, first of all, the technology sat there in plain sight for months. GPT-3 sat there in plain sight for months until somebody wrote essentially a wrapper around it and turned it into ChatGPT, turned it into an API, made it available and easy to use by everybody. But the first inflection point was generative, as you mentioned. The ability to translate, convert information from one form to another form, and auto-regressively generate tokens. And the second, but of course, the problem with generative AI is that it's prone to hallucinate. And the reason for that is not because there's something fundamentally wrong with the technology, not because it didn't learn all the right things, but because it's not grounded on contextual information. It's not grounded on relevant information. And so the second thing that happened was O1, and reasoning came about, but behind O1 is also grounding on research, grounding on truth, and the ability to combine generative with semantic, we call it retrieval augmented generation, but basically conditional generation, okay? Conditional generation meaning that what you're about to generate depends on context and ground truth or whatever research or whatever it is. And so the second generation introduced reasoning, self-reflection, the ability to self-correct, because sometimes what comes out, your mouth, you kind of wish that you pulled back and you go, and so in the case of AI, it has the ability to do that in real time. And so O1 became much more grounded, and the information that was generated was more reliable. So what happened? What came out as a curiosity and incredible excitement, and the tech industry jumping onto it because we realized what can happen. The next phase of it, the usefulness of ChatGPT just skyrocketed. But the amount of tokens that it generated was much, much more than the first generation. Maybe 100 times more tokens. The model is maybe 10 times larger, so it's probably something like 1,000 times more compute. So from O1 over ChatGPT, call it 1,000 times. And then because it was so useful, maybe 1,000,000 times more usage. Okay? So the combination of usage and its usefulness and groundedness allows us we saw that next phase of growth. But in the end, what O1 did was it provided information, essentially a chatbot that was much more factual. It was informational. And of course, for many of us, we use it for research and we use it all the time. Instead of searching, our goal isn't to search, our goal is to get answers. And so ChatGPT gave us that. That was kind of the second inflection. The inflection that we're seeing here also sat in plain sight for quite a long time. And it's basically the ability for AI to use files, access files, and use tools. And so now it could reason, it could think, it could use tools, it could solve problems. And it could do search, it could do planning. And so probably the biggest phenomenon that's happening, and if you're paying attention to it, I'm sure you are, OpenClaw is probably the single most important release of software, probably ever. And if you look at OpenClaw and the adoption of it, Linux took some 30 years to reach this level. OpenClaw in 3 weeks has now surpassed Linux. It is now the single most downloaded open source software in history, and it took 3 weeks. If you look at the line, even in semi-log, this thing is straight up. It's vertical. It looks like the y-axis. I've never seen anything like it. Okay, it literally looks like the y-axis, and so what's happening now? You could give a problem statement. Start with the prompt goes create. The last prompt, the way you kind of think about it, the last prompt was what is, when is, who is, right? That's the last prompt. This now prompt goes create, do, build, write. Does that make sense? So what's happened? The last prompt was queries. This prompt are actions. They're tasks. Do something for me. And you describe it as, expressively as you like, as with a lot of intention, and let it infer, or very specific. And it goes off and it just churns. It just thinks. It goes off and it does research and it reads a manual. If it has to use a tool, it's never used it before, it reads the manual of the tool. It goes off and studies what's on the web and it applies the tools and performs the task. Now, I just said we went from one generative prompt, one generative response, to now one that is 1,000 times more tokens, and agents. We call them at the company claws. These claws are now consuming, 1 million times more tokens? They're running continuously in the background. We have a whole bunch of claws in the company, and they're all continuously running, doing things for us, developing tools, developing software. And so now the question is the implication. The amount of compute in our company that we need has just got skyrocketed. The amount of compute every company needs is skyrocketing.
What happened in the last 2 years? Well, 3 things. ChatGPT, of course, started the generative AI era. It's able to not just understand, perceive and understand, it's able to also translate and generation of unique content. I showed you the fusion of generative AI with computer graphics, and it brought computer graphics to life. You guys, everybody in the world should be using ChatGPT. I know I use it every single morning, used it plenty this morning. And so ChatGPT was the generative AI era. The second, by the way, generative computing versus the way we used to do computing, it's generative AI is a capability of software, but it has profoundly changed how computing is done. Computing used to be retrieval-based, now it's generative. Keep that thought in mind when I talk about certain things, and you'll realize why it is that everything that we do is going to change how computers are architected, how computers are provided, how computers are going to be built out, and what is the meaning of computing altogether. Generative AI, 2023, end of 22, 2023. The next, reasoning AI, 01, and then took off with 03. Reasoning allowed it to reflect, allows it to think to itself, allowed it to plan, break down problems, and decompose a problem it couldn't understand into steps or parts that it could understand. It could ground itself on research. 01 made generative AI trustworthy and grounded on truth. That caused ChatGPT to simply took off. And that was a very, very big moment. The amount of input tokens that was necessary in order to produce and the amount of output tokens it generated in order to reason. The model was a little bit larger. Of course, you could have much larger models. The model 01 was a little bit larger, not much larger. But its input token usage for context and its output token for thinking increased the amount of computation tremendously. Then came Claude Code, the first agentic model. It was able to read files, code, compile it, test it, evaluate it, go back and iterate on it. Claude Code has revolutionized software engineering, as all of you know. 100% of Nvidia is using a combination of, or oftentimes all 3 of them, Claude Code, Codex, and Cursor, all over Nvidia. There's not one software engineer today who is not assisted by one or many AI agents helping them code. Claude Code completely revolutionized. It's the new inflection. And for the first time, you don't ask an AI what, where, when, how. You ask it create, do, build. You ask it to use tools, take your context, read files. It's able to agentically break down a problem, reason about it, reflect on it. It's able to solve problems and actually perform tasks. An AI that was able to perceive became an AI that could generate An AI that could generate became an AI that could reason. An AI that could reason now became an AI that can actually do work, very productive work. The amount of computation in the last 2 years, we know that everybody in this room knows the computing demand for Nvidia GPU is off the charts. Spot pricing is skyrocketing. You couldn't find a GPU if you tried, and yet, in the meantime, we're shipping GPUs out. Incredible amounts of it, and demand just keeps on going up. There's a reason for that. This fundamental inflection. Finally, AI is able to do productive work, and therefore, the inflection point of inference has arrived. AI now has to think. In order to think, it has to inference. AI now has to do. In order to do, it has to inference. AI has to read. In order to do so, it has to inference. It has to reason. It has to inference. Every part of AI, every time it has to think, it has to reason, it has to do, it has to generate tokens, it has to inference. It's way past training now. It's in the field of inference. So the inference inflection has arrived. At the time when the amount of tokens, the amount of compute necessary increased by roughly 10,000 times. Now, when I combine these two, the fact that since in the last 2 years, the computing demand of the work has gone up by 10,000 times, and the amount of usage has probably gone up by 100 times. People have heard me say, I believe that computing demand has increased by 1 million times in the last 2 years. It is the feeling that we all have. It is the feeling every startup has. It's the feeling that OpenAI has. It's the feeling that Anthropic has. If they could just get more capacity, they could generate more tokens. Their revenues would go up. More people could use it. The more advanced, the smarter the AI could become. We are now at that positive flywheel system. We have reached that moment. The inflection, the inference inflection has arrived. In the last 2 years, we saw basically 3 inflection points. The first one was generative. ChatGPT brought AI to the common everybody, to our awareness. But the fact of the matter is the technology sat in plain sight months before GPT. It wasn't until ChatGPT put a user interface around it, made it easy for us to use, that generative AI took off. Now, generative AI, as you know, generates tokens for internal consumption as well as external consumption. Yeah. Internal consumption is thinking, which led to reasoning. 01 and 03 continued that wave of ChatGPT, grounded information, made AI not only answer questions, but answer questions in a more grounded way useful. We started seeing the revenues and the economic model of OpenAI start to inflect. Then the third one was only inside the industry that we saw, Claude Code, the first agentic system that was very useful, really revolutionary stuff. But Claude Code was only available for enterprises. Most people outside never saw anything about Claude Code until OpenClaw. OpenClaw basically put into the popular consciousness what an AI agent can do. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why OpenClaw is so important from a cultural perspective. Now, the second reason why it's so important is that OpenClaw is open, but it formulates, it structures a type of computing model that is basically reinventing computing altogether. It has a memory system. It's a short-term memory file system. It has scales. It has scales. Yeah. Did you say skills or scales?
Skills.
Oh, skills.
They do have scales, yes. Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah,
skills.
So yeah. The first thing, it has resources. It manages resources. It does scheduling. Yep. Right, and cron jobs. It could spawn off agents. It could decompose a task and cause and solve problems. So it does scheduling. It has I/O subsystems. It could input. It has output. It can connect to WhatsApp, and also it has a API that allows it to run multiple types of applications called skills.
Yeah.
These 4 elements fundamentally define a computer.
Yeah.
And therefore, what do we have? we have a personal artificial intelligence computer for the very first time.
Open source.
It's open source. It runs literally everywhere. And so this is basically the blueprint, the operating system of modern computing.
Yeah.
And it's going to run literally everywhere.
But I want to go back to this agentic explosion that you're seeing inside your company, the efficiencies, the productivity gains inside your company. There's a lot of debate whether or not we're seeing ROI, right? And you and I entering into this year, the big question was, are the revenues going to show up? Are the revenues going to scale like intelligence?
Let me come back and say a couple things. One, when we went from generative to reasoning, the amount of computation we needed was about 100 times.
Right.
When we went from reasoning to agentic, the computation is probably another 100 times. Now we're looking at, in just 2 years, computation went up by a fact 10,000x. Meanwhile, people pay for information, but people mostly pay for work.
Right.
Yes.
Talking to a chatbot and getting an answer is super great.
Right.
Helping me do some research, unbelievable. But getting work done, I'll pay for.
Indeed.
And so that's where we are. Agentic systems get work done. They're helping our software engineers get work done. And so then you take that, you got 10,000x more compute. You get probably, at this point, 100x more consumption now.
Yes. Yeah.
And we haven't even started scaling yet. We are absolutely at 1,000,000x.
Which is a great place to talk about the number of
10 trillion
engineers
market
you have,
cap, I mean.
20, 30,000.
In your second question, what's going to be the inflection, the next inflection of token rate generation? The 5x came about because of reasoning. I have a feeling that we have a 50x in front of us. And the 50x in front of us is because of agentic systems. The reasoning is going to come with it. Tool use and planning and simulation. It's almost like AlphaGo in real time, you know? And so I think that's probably around the corner. These agentic systems is likely to cause token rates to go way up. The demand for computing is really, really high right now, as you guys know. Because of the 3 scaling laws, reasoning and agentic systems is putting enormous amounts of pressure, multimodality, larger models, is putting enormous amount of pressure on the training systems. On the inference systems, because of long thinking, putting enormous amount of pressure. And then all of a sudden, agentic systems comes along, putting enormous amount of pressure on the... And then because these models are now so useful, the number of AI startups is going through the roof. If you look at the number of AI startups from 2025 versus the year before, it almost doubled. And the amount of money they raised, most of it is going to go towards compute, right? So that you can be an AI company. And so the amount of burden on, the pressure on the computing companies is really high. That's why our customer demand's so high.
Comes back to this, over 40% of your revenue today is inference. But inference is about ready because of chain of reasoning.
Yeah.
Right?
It's about to go up by 1 billion times.
Right, by a million X, by a billion X.
That's right. That's the part that most people haven't completely internalized. This is that industry we were talking about, but
Right.
this is the Industrial Revolution.
Right. That's the production of intelligence.
That's right.
Right?
It's going to go up 1 billion times.
Right. And everybody's so hyper-focused on Nvidia as kind of like doing training on bigger models.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't it the case that your revenue, if it's 50-50 today, you're going to do way more inference in the future.
Yeah.
Right? Training will always be important, but just the growth of inference is going to be way larger than growth in training.
We hope.
It's almost impossible to conceive otherwise.
Yeah, we hope. That's right.
Right.
Yeah. It's good to go to school.
Yes.
But the goal is so that you can be productive in society later. And so it's good that we train these models, but the goal is to inference them,